The atmosphere on the set of Today with Jenna and Friends was electric from the moment Teddy Swims stepped onto the stage. His energy, which was usually described as soulful and grounded, carried a slightly tense edge that more ninja subtle undercurrent, that only the most attuned audience members might have noticed. At first, it seemed like any other light-hearted segment. Jenna Bush-Hager welcomed him warmly. Co-hosts smiled, the audience clapped enthusiastically, and the banter began. Teddy, dressed in a denim jacket with his signature sunglasses perched on his head, exchanged a few witty remarks with the hosts and even shared a laugh or two. But beneath the surface, a friction was quietly building. When the conversation shifted, from music to more personal topics, Teddy's demeanor began to change. Jenna, trying to be personable and relatable, steered the discussion toward Teddy's upbringing and his struggles before fame, a topic he had previously spoken about publicly, but always on his own terms. "You've been through so much," she said with a sympathetic tone. "And I think what America loves about you is how vulnerable you are."
Can we talk about that time you said you didn't think you were enough?
The question hung in the air, heavy and exposing. Teddy smiled briefly, more out of habit than comfort, and nodded. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I've talked about that in my songs a lot." There was a pause. Jenna took that as a cue to push a little further. "You mentioned in an interview last year that there were nights you didn't want to wake up. That's powerful.
Oh.
How do you think those moments shaped your voice?" The room went still. Teddy's jaw flexed slightly, his fingers curling around the arm of the chair. The audience, unaware of the shift, remained politely quiet. "That's a big thing to bring up before noon," he said, his tone light but his eyes sharp. Jenna laughed awkwardly. "Well, it's real life, right?" she offered. Teddy nodded, but his body language spoke volumes. He crossed his arms, leaned back, and looked off camera for a moment. "It's real," he said, "but not everything has to be turned into a moment for a morning show." Jenna, slightly thrown off, tried to reel it back in, suggesting they shift to talking about his recent tour. The tension had already landed like a thunderclap. One of the co-hosts chimed in, trying to change the mood by playing a clip from one of Teddy's more emotional music videos, over which Jenna began, narrating lines about his raw, emotional journey. That was the final straw. Teddy leaned forward and said, "You know what? I came here to talk music and share some good energy, not get dissected like I'm a trauma exhibit." There was a stunned silence. Jenna's eyes widened as Teddy slowly stood up, removing his mic and placing it gently on the table. "Y'all be good," he said calmly. "I'm out." And just like that, in front of a stunned studio audience and millions watching live, Teddy Swims walked off the set. The camera cut to an emergency commercial break while whispers and confusion erupted on the set. Behind the scenes, backstage, a flurry of producers rushed around in controlled chaos, headsets buzzing with panicked instructions and whispered strategy. Jenna Bush-Hager sat frozen in her chair for a moment longer than anyone expected, blinking away the awkward silence before cameras cut. A stagehand gently handed her a glass of water, and she offered a stiff smile in return, clearly rattled. "We'll be right back," she'd managed to say before the feed was yanked. Meanwhile, Teddy Swims was already outside the studio doors, his denim jacket clutched in one hand and his phone pressed to his ear. "Nah, man, I'm good," he muttered into the phone, his voice strained but steady. They tried to corner me with some daytime therapy session crap. He paced in a narrow hallway, past interns and tech crew who avoided eye contact, not wanting to become part of the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, inside the studio, the control room was in full triage mode. "Do we cut the rest of the segment? Go with the cooking demo early?" asked one assistant director, while the show's executive producer rubbed her temples in frustration. "Get Jenna to address it on air. We have to acknowledge it somehow. He just left mid-show." Someone else shouted, "Do we still play the performance clip? Do we have clearance?" The scramble behind the scenes mirrored the growing buzz. Online, where clips of Teddy's walkout screen recorded and reposted within minutes were already trending under hashtags like hashtag Teddy Swims storms out and hashtag Today's Show meltdown. Tweets ranged from supportive to critical, with fans defending Teddy's right to walk away from what they saw as emotional ambush. While others debated whether daytime TV was the right platform for such intense conversations, back inside, Jenna returned to her seat with her composure partially restored and looked directly into the camera when the show returned live. "I want to take a moment to address what just happened," she said in a firm yet conciliatory tone. "Hear it today. With Jenna and Friends, we believe in open conversations, but we also believe in comfort, respect, and boundaries. Teddy Swims is an incredible artist, and we're grateful he joined us today." Her words were carefully chosen, clearly filtered through PR counsel, and her co-host nodded in solidarity. Still, something about her demeanor revealed she wasn't entirely sure whether to feel blindsided, embarrassed, or justified. Meanwhile, Teddy stood just outside the loading dock where a black SUV was already waiting. A showrunner offered to walk him to the car, but he shook his head. "I just need air," he muttered. "I don't like being put on the spot like that. Like I'm some sad story people cry over with their coffee." He pulled out a cigarette, lit it with shaky hands, and exhaled slowly as the morning sun poured down over the lot. A few fans, with sharp eyes and faster phones, managed to grab a photo of him outside, cigarette in one hand and mic wire still draped from his pocket, a visual that quickly went viral. The image, part rebel, part wounded artist, sparked a wave of think pieces and reaction videos by lunchtime, all dissecting what had gone wrong, who was to blame, and whether daytime talk shows were evolving or devolving into exploitative theater masked as heartfelt connection. The situation had grown far beyond a simple walkout. It had ignited a media firestorm * by midday. Headlines splashed across entertainment blogs and news sites alike, each putting its own spin on the dramatic exit. Teddy Swims storms off today with Jenna and Friends, an emotional walkout, led the more sympathetic narratives, while others took a more critical angle with titles like unprofessional or just honest. Teddy Swims leaves hosts stunned. On live TV, the show's social media team moved quickly, posting a carefully worded statement that praised Teddy's artistry and noted the importance of respecting guest boundaries. However, comment sections lit up with polarized opinions. Some viewers called the show manipulative for broaching sensitive topics without warning, while others accused Teddy of being overly reactive and disrespectful to the hosts. The clip from the episode, particularly the moment when Teddy abruptly unhooked his mic and stood up with a tight-lipped "Nope, not doing this," gained millions of views within hours. Fans who knew him for his emotionally raw music immediately empathized, arguing that the line between vulnerability and exploitation had been crossed. One viral post read, "Y'all want the pain behind the voice, but don't want to give the man peace. Respect his boundaries." Meanwhile, a well-known morning show analyst posted, "Talk shows are entering dangerous territory when therapy replaces conversation without consent." Back at the studio, producers held an emergency meeting to assess damage control strategies. Jenna reportedly insisted on calling Teddy personally to apologize if he'd felt ambushed, even though some on the team felt he'd overreacted. "We wanted a heartfelt moment, not a confrontation," one staff member lamented behind closed doors. "It was supposed to be about resilience, about overcoming, not rehashing trauma." Teddy, meanwhile, stayed silent on social media, choosing, instead, to retreat to his studio in Brooklyn, where he spent the afternoon recording. An insider later said he put all the emotion from that morning into a new track titled "Glass Table," with lyrics that hinted at feeling exposed, misread, and used for spectacle. The show's team, meanwhile, debated whether to air the rest of Teddy's segment in future broadcasts, or let it quietly fade away. A few insiders even whispered that producers were considering a follow-up episode tackling boundaries and the new rules of celebrity interviews, possibly with a panel of artists and psychologists. It was an attempt to spin controversy into content, a familiar strategy in the daytime world. But what was clear to everyone involved was that the rules of engagement had shifted. Teddy's walkout wasn't just a moment, it was a mirror. It forced a public reckoning with the increasingly blurred lines between authenticity and performative vulnerability on talk shows. Behind the scenes, guests scheduled for future episodes began quietly requesting assurances about interview content, demanding veto power over discussion topics. PR teams grew warier, issuing preemptive questions and interview guardrails. The ripple effects were real, reshaping the show's booking process and editorial approach for the foreseeable future. Asterisk. Later that evening, as the dust of the day's media frenzy continued to swirl, Teddy Swims finally broke his silence with a single, emotionally charged post on his Instagram story, a black screen with white text that simply read, "You can't pull healing out of someone like it's good TV." That line instantly exploded across social platforms, reposted by fans, fellow musicians, and mental health advocates alike. The power of his statement wasn't just in its brevity, it was in its rawness, its refusal to be palatable, and its resistance to the idea that pain is public property. As midnight approached, Teddy uploaded a short video clip of himself seated at a piano, his voice hoarse yet deliberate, performing a haunting acoustic piece with lyrics clearly referencing the day's events. "If you ask me why I'm crying, make sure you're not smiling when I do." The video wasn't captioned, but it didn't need to. Bit's intention rang loud. By the next morning, the hashtag #StandWithTeddy hashtag had emerged, with thousands of fans and artists chiming in with their own stories of feeling exploited in vulnerable moments. Its prominent figures, from Grammy-winning singers to best-selling authors, reposted the clip, noting how often sensitivity is mistaken for fragility and how the hunger for ratings often outweighs basic compassion. The show's producers scrambled again, this time to draft a more formal public response. Jenna, visibly shaken, opened the following day's episode with an unscripted moment. Sitting alone on the couch, she looked directly into the camera and said, "Yesterday, we failed someone, not as producers or hosts, but as human beings. We never want this show to hurt anyone." Her voice cracked as she apologized directly to Teddy and viewers who felt disappointed by what had transpired. She didn't deflect or defend, and that vulnerability, though measured, struck a chord with many. Still, not everyone was satisfied. Critics pointed out that the damage had been done, and questioned why the segment hadn't been more thoughtfully constructed, especially considering Teddy's well-documented emotional openness in his music. Inside the industry, whispers of a cultural reckoning in daytime talk began to circulate. Executives at other shows reportedly held emergency meetings about guest protocols, sensitive content, and pre-interview consent forms. Meanwhile, Teddy's own camp received a flood of offers from podcasts, wanting exclusive interviews to mental health platforms offering collaborations. But Teddy remained mostly quiet, reportedly choosing to spend time in Atlanta with close friends and collaborators. His inner circle emphasized the importance of space, stating he wasn't interested in a redemption arc, but rather a return to intention. He didn't walk out for drama, one close friend shared anonymously. He walked out because no one else would have if he didn't. As the conversation stretched into the weekend, talk shifted from one man's emotional boundary to a broader conversation about media ethics. Teddy had inadvertently thrown a spotlight on the way modern television walks the line between empathy and exploitation. And that spotlight wasn't moving anytime soon. Asterisk.